Vocabio. Master English your way.
For the last few years, we've individualized politics to such an extent that, you know, we end up
not be ignored, rather than working in kind of individualized silos.
Same case, we're not talking about individualized sentencing, taking care of the specifics of each situation.
Are individualized, because it is the case that
talk about more individualized sanctions regimes if you're talking about the Magnitskys and your.
He announced that he has been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. Henry.
When you were diagnosed, whether you made such a conscious
and diagnose earlier, and I think that's a critical part of this. I don't see.
And they became like family. A bunch of years later, Danny was diagnosed with end-stage pancreatic cancer.
Processing and AI, and in 2014, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and
surgery at King's College London. That means he specialises in surgery related to obesity.
Check is writer and academic specialising in the future of work and currently a lecturer in the digital.
Incredibly diverse, where one person might choose to specialise in learning how to play tennis, and another person.
Tom Moser is an engineer specialising in materials. And at some point
of biomaterials at the University of Oxford, specialising in the creation of tiny devices for targeted drugs.
Let's not forget, the government tried for 8 months to suppress the report. And it was only, they tried everything.
Status that it can be more effectively suppressed. They're very good at that.
2 is that you suppress some of those lower scales. So
the government suppressed discussion. And what was fascinating to me,
in some people's eyes, those in a position of strength and suppressing the disenfranchised, which I think is
trauma recovery techniques they need so that they can redevelop their resilience and continue.
As you're redeveloping these facilities, you are designing to
redefine or redevelop or just re-understand our terms, like war and peace.
Model from what was used to redevelop internally in China to how to influence abroad.
Terms. So he redevelops Westminster. You just go into Westminster Hall.
I'm really interested in the desire to be portrayed. I'm really interested in that desire to.
If it's portrayed as an East-West conflict, outside that sort of.
And instead she stopped eating, and she's often portrayed in art with a beard because anorexics often get, a
significant amount of political control into how the war is portrayed. The one thing that, again, doing the research for the book...
An account of how Russians have portrayed their own history and their own past over the centuries. And he's...
used to today, into one that is much more centralized on nation states and national capitals. Now, this is a challenge.
Anti-position because he has the belief that a centralized authority can make the world a better place.
List that is permissionless, that can be sent without, a centralized third party being able to block those transactions.
It's clear that this shouldn't be a centralized model, where the power that within our model.
Engineering and building and the centralized dictation of preferences than we'd had a decade ago.
Well, for a few months now, has been undertaking a new inquiry into left behind white workers. I think it's not that it doesn't want to undertake some kind of reforms. I mean, that
process for organisations to undertake. Do you think there will be a reluctance to identify noise?
And can probably undertake treatment initially before referring to a psychiatrist.
It down and then you flush it is a better practice to undertake.
Thank you very much. And look around and navigate it and manipulate adults and, feed herself.
The agent was involved. It was actually just by manipulating, of all things, my apologies to any listeners who happen to...
Fire, and how to actually manipulate fire and be able to control it in some...
Now that's an eternity in brain time, being manipulated and molded into something.
Different behaviors, but also we can manipulate testosterone levels in a bunch of different kinds of animals.
The Great Leap Forward, he launched this attempt to industrialize and collectivize the economy, but it was just so
cricket and God knows what else. You know, we built the industrialized West, managed to rise on the fact that it was able to get
of abuse to be industrialized. You know, the costs were non-existent. People could just
industrialized democracies, because then we have Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and India.
When China was not the country that industrialized first, and that China got left behind in the turn.
But before that happens, Challenger will undergo a lot more than just its return from
a patient who is undergoing treatment for advanced prostate cancer. Now, neurosurgery is not
expectancy of somebody who undergoes major depression.
That's right, and that's independent of suicide.
Are kind of undergoing quite huge change right now, so energy is being totally disrupted by potentially quite
things. And for those who are undergoing the oppression, those who have
the Labour Party, whether you love it or you loathe it, is the only non-conservative force in the country, in the United
I love this. What terms do we love and loathe and why? I mean, you know, there's so many buzzwords out there.
Which he loathed and hated, or staying at home and die.
But then he also loathed Israel, which doesn't take any dissent and stands up.
Zingers and the loathing and the snark and the performative side of social media.
From people to try and redistribute wealth in various ways, ultimately. And that brings
importance of their constraining them and redistributing their fruit and making them sustainable.
We work with the fashion industry to redistribute and recycle their excess fabric.
Jessica then confiscating this wealth and redistributing it to maintain equality. I contend that most
Americans, or should it be about redistributing wealth, which is the kind of top line that Bernie Sanders.
Amounts of data you can maximize whatever you want. Think about it. If you're a CEO of Amazon,
at various points, I'm saying that maximizing growth and maximizing your route to net zero are two.
Rational to the extent that you maximize your preference satisfaction given the amount of money you have.
It was explicit. The demand to maximize shareholder value wasn't to actually just enrich shareholders.
Because in general, a lot of Chinese political thought is about maximizing the discretion of the sovereign, of the
times. I love trying to compile a list of questions in the morning, which is a
flag and says, hey, you just compiled an AI program that got all this 90% men
study, and he compiled a voluminous series of case studies gathered from around the colonized.
Started to compile notes on COVID-19 in mid-January because I
compiled a voluminous series of case studies gathered from around the colonized world about
might have been infected and then quarantined or isolated the people who were. So that the best performances came from democracy.
Clearly are not going to join in a Western campaign to isolate Russia. They've made that absolutely clear, and you can see it in
relationships look like. It can also be really isolating. What we see is the importance and the need for community.
They isolate regimes, they entrench regimes, they repress dissent.
We then tease out and isolate what are the mechanisms that are driving the biggest change.
The West would still be diversifying away from Russian commodities. You know, the permanent.
So it's clearly advantageous for us to diversify or to continue to diversify our trading relations. And
months. And so global capital still needs to diversify. They're going to search for growth. And as we mentioned,
began to diversify. 20 years after his trip, Darwin had written
process. And how do you do that? You diversify your thought of how you process.
Risk-taking, you know, all of these things that are also correlated with success in life, educational attainment as it's currently set up.
Efficiency difference, it doesn't correlate to how energy efficient your property is.
Lemur is, you know, much less flexible. And we correlated that with how much REM sleep they get.
Related is wealth creation globally or innovation to
ecosystem parts would mean the risks are correlated positively, which dulls the ability of.
Not that it means we should therefore confine ourselves to feline love. What she writes about in this one.
Screens and out and about a little bit. He's also been confined to births. He's obviously in rather splendid isolation.
One
Confining this conversation to what's happening on university.
Police speech is not confined to those in positions of authority. Anyone who objects can pile on.
Economist, so I don't feel confined to giving an economist's answer. I think that
over to Yahya Fernouzi, who is going to oppose you. I'll introduce Yahya properly when we've heard from Peter.
I don't see it as a question of Black history opposed to white history, but of truth rather than
border and have legal as opposed to illegal immigration. He is right that we
Democratic moderates like Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema who oppose this move in the Senate right now. So I think this is.
And there was a real intolerance of any opposing views or different facts or figures.
Vocabio, available in Google Play. Download, discover, improve your English.